Hello everyone, Mehdi for Tokyo Alpha Mind. I'm a finance and AI professional as well as global investor from Japan for over a decade now. On this channel, we have one mission: to cut through the noise and find alpha in both markets and life. So today we are going to talk about all the news happening in the Japanese market. So let's go through it. The first piece of news that I want to discuss this week is basically the decision of the Bank of Japan to hold the interest rate at 0.5% in Japan. So that was kind of expected. There is no big surprise here, but it really shows that the BoJ has a hard time to be able to increase interest rates, even though that they are specifying that this is what they really want to do on the long term. So this is actually quite a big news for Japan, because it shows like the kind of dilemma that the BoJ has today. So this was kind of the first part of the news. Then the second part is the intention of the BoJ to taper the purchase of Japanese government bonds. So what does it mean? It means that with time, the Bank of Japan aims to reduce the level of purchasing that they are doing with Japanese debt. It might seem a bit surprising, but also like this is what they promise and this is what they forecast. But realistically, if we look at it really in details, and I will show that into the graphics here, this is really not that much. And what we can see is that it's not going to really improve significantly the situation in Japan. So that's, I think, the first significant news that we have seen on the Japanese market. Is going to actually shape the Japanese economy like going forward. But to be honest, like, it's not really like a lot of change so far in terms of policy for the Bank of Japan. And as we discussed, and as we're going to discuss more and more on the channel, like Japan is really in a very tough situation, at least on a monetary and fiscal basis. So the second piece of news that actually caught our attention in the Japanese market this week is about exports. So we just received the May figures about overall exports and industry-specific exports for Japan, and they are not good. So basically, overall exports for the first time in 8 months has been down like minus 1.7%. And the biggest actually drop, and this is very impactful for Japan, is like a minus 20% decline in terms of automobile export, especially towards the US with the trade war and the tariff wars started by Donald Trump. And so this is really a big headwind for the Japanese economy, and this really explains why the Bank of Japan has been so reluctant so far also to increase the interest rate and is very cautious about the Japan economy, because what we've seen with this export decline so far is that Japan, as an export-reliant economy, is having really trouble to compete on a global scale. And so this is not very good news, to be honest. The third piece of news that we picked up this weekend in the Japanese market is more about economy and actually tourism in Japan. So we've seen like that the Japanese government has a proposal to actually increase taxes on basically foreign tourism. So actually it comes in two aspects. So the first one is about ending the duty-free shopping in Japan. So for the past 10-20 years, so we've seen this system in Japan where basically foreign residents are able to purchase goods in Japan, so tax-free, so meaning without the consumption tax. And this is something that actually helped increase tourism in Japan quite significantly in the last few years. But basically the tax burden for the Japanese economy, or I would say the need of the Japanese government to increase its tax revenues, has really pushed them like to consider ending this system, especially with the rise of tourism in Japan and the kind of over-tourism that we are seeing today, either in Tokyo or in Kyoto and this type of big cities. And the second aspect is actually about putting a new tax on foreign tourism or foreign tourists. So the proposal is to have a tax like in other countries when people leave the country, so kind of a departure tax, and this will also help the Japanese government to raise the tax revenues. So as you can see, like all these news, they are kind of linked together. So with the government and the need of Japan to actually improve its fiscal policies and its fiscal situation. Finally, the last piece of news that we picked up this week is about the completion of the acquisition of Nippon Steel of US Steel. So basically, this has been an 18-month story for the giant or Japanese giant within the steel industry. So this acquisition was actually blocked by the Biden administration so earlier this year, so like in January, but it has been overturned by the Donald Trump administration, so very recently. The most interesting part of the deal is basically like the US government having golden shares for this new entity. And what we can see is that this is kind of nationalization of US Steel, even though this is an acquisition from Nippon Steel. And this is really intriguing and interesting to see the dynamics between US and Japan, where here we have Japanese actors trying to acquire US companies, and the US is kind of developing some kind of protectionism, even though they agreed to the agreement. So the situation is still not very clear, and it's not very clear as well if Nippon Steel really has control over the acquisition. But all in all, it shows that there are some industries in Japan which are still quite, I would say, impactful and quite relevant in this world. And so this is really a very interesting story to pick up this week. Well, so that's all for the news of the Japanese market this week. Hope to see you like in another video. And if you're still interested in Asia and Japanese and US markets, so feel free to watch the other videos of this channel, and let's keep in touch. See you, bye.